Hello, today I was a guest on the CIO Insights podcast by ETS Solutions. I had a nice opportunity to talk with Christian Brown about a number of things facing the CIO in today's economy and today's business world, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. We explored a lot of different topics, relationship management, conflict management, and I really enjoyed the time I've spent with Christian today. For over 20 years, ETS Solutions has been working with corporate clients to help them with their digital transformation strategies. To learn more about ETS, visit etssolutions.com.
And now a word from our sponsor, ETS Solutions.
Hello, this is Jim Beard with ETS Solutions. Thanks for checking out our new podcast series, CIO Insights, where we get a little bit more personal with our guests. We talk about their careers, we talk about their personal interests, and we even ask them to give a little bit of advice to those who are still coming up the ranks. For over 20 years now, ETS has been providing award-winning technology consulting services. Based on our 5 core values of faith, family, community service, client experience, and trust, we're able to offer consulting services to just about every vertical. And our services cover everything from edge computing and cloud services to voice and data to cybersecurity and project management. Whatever your technology needs are, we can help. We invite you to check out the link below or call the number below to find out more about ETS and where we can fit into your technology stack. Enjoy the podcast.
Robert, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Christian. Nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. I know you're only in Atlanta for a few days. You actually leave tomorrow.
I do. Yeah, I've been here all week and love visiting Atlanta, love visiting our offices in Marietta. So it's nice to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time. We appreciate it.
Certainly.
And so just give our audience kind of a look into your life. Like, what was the path that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's kind of I describe it as somewhat Walter Mitty-ish, if you're familiar with The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which was a short story that was written, and the author's name escapes me at the time. James Thurber, I think, is the author. I got introduced to this story in sophomore year in college, and I kind of categorized my career a little bit like that. I found myself in situations that sometimes I was ready for opportunities that surfaced and revealed themselves. Other times I wasn't, and was able to learn some lessons along the way. But I got involved in technology because I had a strong interest in a particular company run by Ross Perot called Electronic Data Systems. I had a strong interest in Ross Perot as a person, as the founder of kind of the whole outsourcing industry after he left IBM, started EDS with $1,000 in his pocket. Wow. And I was just enamored by Ross Perot and his leadership style. Had no interest in technology. I graduated from Clarion University with a degree in communication and an MBA, and was looking for work and thought I was going to go into the advertising field, but landed in technology and had just some great opportunities along the way, Electronic Data Systems being one of them.
Awesome. So I'm interested, what made you stay in the technology industry, right? Once you got in here, what kind of built up your passion and love for it?
Yeah, I think that the solutioning aspect of the application of technology to solve real world business problems is probably what made me stay in technology. 7 years at EDS, I was fortunate enough to get selected for the EDS leadership internship program shortly after my second year with the company, and that was a 12-month program. Monthly, they would bring in speakers like incredible speakers, leaders of topics in the industry like Herb Cohen on negotiation and Peter Singhi on the learning organization. And it was just a tremendous experience. And as I built up a little bit more of a, kind of a resume, if you will, on leadership and the application of technology to solve business problems, it took off from there. And when I left EDS after 7 years, it was it wasn't terrifying, but it was a really difficult decision for me to leave that organization because I had so many friends there, and EDS was treated me so well, not only as an employee but as a person. But I left EDS and joined Anderson Consulting, and that's when I cut my teeth in mergers and acquisitions, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah. So we'll get into that later, but I do want to talk about you as a person.
Sure.
Right, and talk a little bit about your core values, because before this we spoke about how your core values kind of align with ours at ETS. So talk a little bit about what your core values are and how have they played a part in your career growth.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share that as well. I mean, I grew up in rural Western Pennsylvania, so I mean, if anyone wants some insight into my upbringing, my life, pick up J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy. I'm reading that book and I'm like, wow, I could have wrote this book. And I was a little jealous, honestly, because I'm like, J.D. Vance beat me to it. But yeah, I grew up in rural Western Pennsylvania. We lived in a pretty modest home. My father was a coal miner. My mom was a housewife. We certainly weren't, poverty level, but we probably were pretty close, but I didn't know it. And when I left home to go to college, I thought I was going to play professional baseball. So I had delusions of grandeur about that for at least 2 years. And then it dawned on me that I probably wasn't going to do that. And I had to pick a real, a major and actually study and do good things in the academic world. I joined the Marine Corps after undergrad school. I was looking for ways to find funds to support my graduate school costs, and I joined the Marine Corps Reserve. And back then, I'm sure, like thousands of other college students who joined the Marine Corps Reserve, we had no idea that we were going to get called to active duty for Desert Storm. Wow. But that happened, and it was a great experience. My experience in the Marine Corps was wonderful, great learning experience. And it came about in my life at the time that I probably needed a little bit more discipline and structure. Although I grew up in a pretty structured home with my father, who was former Army reconnaissance sergeant in the Army and served in Korea and Vietnam. Wow. But I came from a long list of military uncles, cousins, and so back to the values. I think. My values have evolved over the course of the past 30 years. Leaving home, with the Marine Corps and participating in Desert Storm and on active duty, which was the last year of my contract with the Marine Corps, it allowed me to do some soul searching as well. I thought leaving for college, and then leaving for grad school, and then leaving to have a work life and a career was kind of where my emphasis and focus had been placed for a number of years. But as you grow and mature as a person and as a professional, you learn that things come along that you don't expect, and how you respond to those events in life is very important. It kind of sets a stage for the next growth trajectory of your values. So I'm proud to say that I'm a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. I don't think that I had any idea what being a Christian was until I hit around 35 years old. But I do believe that we need to take care of one another in many different capacities, professionally and personally. And one of the things that I noticed on one of your podcasts, I mentioned to you, I watched the JJ's podcast, which he's a friend and a really, really talented CIO. He talked about giving back to the community and starting with your local community for young people who are looking to do something outside of punching the clock, going to work, and having fun. In your 20s, your perspectives on priorities might be skewed a certain way. But if you can find a way to give back to your community and then build on that, starting with your local community and then perhaps in a broader base, I think you'll find in life, at least I've found in life, some very gratifying experiences, professionally and personally.
Yeah, and that seems like a common theme from when I talk to CIOs. It's like whenever they serve, they always get something in return. Yeah. Right. Even if they don't go into it looking for a return, it always comes back to them. Yes. So I think that's a good message to give the audience. Certainly. For sure. Yeah. And so when you talk about your background, I know you were in consulting for a long time. Yeah. So how did your consulting background play a part or help you prepare for your role as a CIO? Yeah, that's a really, really insightful question, because I do think that my consulting background has helped me
with success in the professional realm, especially as a CIO. Because as a consultant, especially as you tackle bigger and maybe more complex client engagements, you become learned about how best to apply stakeholder management, really. And you've got clients that are purchasing services or deliverables and the like, especially in the M&A space, which is fast and furious, often on the due diligence and post-deal transaction integration side. I think I've been able to apply the lessons learned as a consultant, working with clients, to my business leaders within our organization, treating them as clients. And I've tried to coach our team, and we've got a wonderful IT team at Wrench, very broad spectrum of experiences and skill sets, but I've tried to coach them and make myself available to them to talk about stakeholder management and why it's important. Technologists in general, I think, are always very interested in getting to the answer as quickly as possible, right? And they're very interested in efficiencies. So time is of the essence. However, I think that along the way, you need to make sure that you're watering and feeding the relationships that you have with your stakeholders. Because if you land the plane and everyone's alive, but the right wing is damaged and a few people broke some legs, that's not success. So I think that stakeholder management, from my consulting background, is definitely an area that I think has been helpful for me to serve as a CIO.
Yeah, that's good. And when you talk about stakeholder management, one question that I have for you, so I wanted to give you two phrases and then get your thoughts on them. Mm-hmm. So the first one is conflict resolution, and the second one is relationship management, which you kind of spoke to. Mm-hmm. But to start out with conflict resolution, what does that mean to you as a CIO?
Yeah, there's never any conflict. Next question. So I think it's really important. Years ago, I mentioned Herb Cohen. He was one of the speakers at the one of the months of the ETS internship. Herb is famous for his negotiation skills. The Iran hostage, I believe he was the lead negotiator in that. Wow. So I think that conflict resolution has an element of negotiation in it, and I think one of the largest pieces of that is looking at the situation from the other person's perspective. And it's hard to do sometimes, because if there's a conflict and you feel wronged in some way, or someone's trying to lead you or your team or the organization down a path that is not the right one, and they're assertive and aggressive in their approach to that, your immediate response, or reaction rather, is also to meet it with aggression and assertiveness. And I think that there's a lot of value in pausing and trying to look at it from that perspective. We talk about the voice of the customer in the Six Sigma methodology. The vision of the combatant, or the vision of the opposition, I think is a really, really important thing to kind of try to incorporate into your approach to conflict resolution. I was also very fortunate along my path to meet this gentleman who was a professor at Michigan State University, William Donahue, who wrote the book Interpersonal Conflict Resolution. I'm probably not getting that exact. But on the cover of that book are the Chinese symbols for crisis and opportunity. And that's the theme of his text and his content is, approaching conflict resolution as awareness of a crisis and awareness that opportunity exists. I think is a really important theme to apply to whatever techniques or lessons learned or approaches you have to trying to resolve conflict in a way that is beneficial for all parties. And it's easy to say, very academically, do this, this. But personalities are at play, and I think to the degree that you can, use that voice of the customer or vision of the opposition in the technique that you use to try to strive towards resolving conflict is really, really important. Relationship management is part of that. One of the things early in my career, I had no idea how important relationships building relationships, investing in relationships. We talked about water and feeding relationships. Is very, very important. You have to take the time to do that. If it, it has to be purposeful. And I think, folks who are just starting their career, students who are graduating from college, even folks in middle management who aspire to get to the C-suite someday, making those investments in relationships, I think, will prove not only to help your career achieve success, but as a person, because at the end of the day, we're all in this, this melting pot together, and we've got to figure out how to work with one another, both professionally and in the civic communities of not only the United States but globally.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, and I like that a lot, and I wanted to mention that and talk about conflict resolution, because I think it's important as a leader and as someone who's being led, right? Because either way, whatever, I guess, ladder you are on or side of the ladder, you're going to deal with conflicts and resolving conflicts, right? And I think it involves a level of emotional intelligence to be able to do that. And so I like what you were saying, because it made me think about that. Think about emotional intelligence and just being aware of the crisis and the opportunity.
Right.
It's like those are things that you have to be emotionally intelligent to really understand.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I love how you talked about relationships as well, because that is literally always the topic, right? Building your network, building out relationships. And so I want to ask you about that, because I feel like everybody may have different opinions on how to build your network and then how to build longevity with relationships. So if you were giving advice to someone who's climbing up the ranks and they're looking to build their network, what would you tell them to do?
Well, I think seeking out people who are in roles and positions that you aspire to be in is important. Taking opportunities to have conversations with not only seasoned leaders, but maybe someone who's 2 or 3 years ahead of you. Because if you think about it, someone who just graduated from college who might be starting a new job, surely there's people in the office or in the organization that are 3 or 4 years into it. What better audience or group of people to tap into, because they've just lived through employment, professional lives over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, so their recall may be more immediate and recent. And then looking at people who are more seasoned also to build relationships, I think, are important, because I think they can provide a more broader perspective on a larger number of scenarios and conditions and situations that would be advantageous. I also think that at any point in your career, if you apply a principle to pay it forward, regardless of where you're at, year 1 or year 30, I think that will prove to help with the water and feeding of relationships, because people remember that. I'm going to mess this up, paraphrasing, but there was a saying, and I don't know who said it. It's pretty, I think, revealing. People remember how they were treated and not necessarily what you did for them, right? And there's a combination of recollection there, but I think how you treated them has a lot more weight to it.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I want to go back. I love what you said there about reaching out to people who are just 2 to 3 years ahead of you. I think that's very valuable. And so if somebody's in that position, what do they say? Right? What is there to be said to ask for value or ask for help or just to pursue that relationship?
I'm a big proponent of easing into those conversations versus pointedly, hey, tell me everything you know from the last 3 years, right? Let me write this down. Right. Easing into those relationships, I think, what you would say is, hey, I'd like to grab lunch with you, or maybe we could grab a coffee. I'm 6 months into this, and you've been here for 3 years, and you've probably, obviously seen a lot more about the organization than I have, and just wanted to grab some coffee and get to know you a little bit better. Taking that kind of softer, more personal approach will ultimately produce, reveal, possible, nuggets of information that might be helpful. And then again, also, don't forget to pay it forward. Hey, can I help you with something that you're struggling with, or I've got some extra time, on Friday afternoon, can I help you with something? Just offering that assistance, even if it's not, acted on, but offering that assistance, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that's so good.
And we hear these terms called the softer side of leadership. I don't really like that terminology. It's leadership. You can be a servant leader in year 1 and year 30 in an organization and in your community. When I started, I had my hands full with Marine Corps Reserves and kicking my career off, but I dove into junior achievement probably 3 months into my professional life in Lansing, Michigan, and I dove into as a volunteer because I wanted to figure out. Well, I wanted to give back to that community because that's where I was living at the time. In East Lansing, but working in Lansing. But I also wanted to, learn, and through interaction and networking with other colleagues that had been in doing junior achievement volunteering for 2 or 3 years, I had that opportunity to talk with them in a variety of different settings.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to shift the conversation over to mistakes and success. So I think people can learn a lot from their own failures or mistakes, but also learn from other people's failures and mistakes.
Sure.
So I want to ask you, what has been your biggest failure or mistake, whichever term, throughout your career, and then what did you learn from it?
Sure. I'd say early in my career, my biggest mistake was not valuing relationships above what I knew, the content of what I knew.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I always had this idea because I was fairly strong academically coming out of high school, and with the exception of the first 2 years of college, when I thought I was going to play Major League Baseball, and didn't devote a whole lot of time to class and studies, I did pretty well in school regardless of those mishaps the first 2 years. I rebounded. But I think that, early in my career, I thought what I knew was more important than who I was working with and the relationships that I needed to build. And I thought this just showing up smart, showing up, knowledgeable about a particular topical area was going to get me, further in my career. And that's important, knowing content, knowing your skills and knowing how to apply those skills is very important. But that engagement aspect of work, whether it's in the blue collar or white collar world, is really, really important. Because at the end of the day, we are not successful on our own in most anything, unless perhaps we're on a desert island, in a mountain cabin, writing novels, Stephen King-like novels, producing that. You could probably be pretty successful on your own doing that.
Right. Interesting. And then success. What has been your biggest success, or what are you most proud of?
Well, Francis Chan has a quote from Crazy Love, and I don't know if you're familiar with Francis Chan and that particular book, Crazy Love. But it goes something like this. Your greatest fear should not be your failures, but being successful at things that don't matter.
Wow.
And it's pretty powerful, right? And I think we all probably devote time and energy to being successful at things that may not matter. Clearly the goals of the mission of the organization that you're employed by or own or part of is important, but striking that balance between personal success and contribution to society, your community, I think is really an important thing for people to focus on. And so for me, success has been more about what I've been able to contribute, not just in the company structure, but outside of that. So finding that balance has been a success for me, and not so much devotion to one particular goal or objective, but a healthy balance of goals and objectives.
I like that, and I like that you mentioned balance, because I wasn't going to go there, but now that you mentioned it, I think it may be valuable.
Sure.
How do you do it? How do you create a balance between work and life and work?
I think it's about expectation setting, and my wife would probably laugh at that comment by me, because I typically don't say no to people. And she actually wrote on a index card once to me when I was overcommitted professionally and personally.
Wow.
And she stuck it in my laptop bag in the area that I would get certain things from when I was traveling. And it was it was an index card that had in her handwriting, "Just say no. The word of the week is no."
Wow.
So there's truth to that. You got to know when to say no, because you can get yourself in trouble health-wise and missing commitments-wise by having too many irons in the fire, to quote a cliche. But I think finding that balance is just knowing what your capacity is, right? Because you've got family life, you've got to devote time to, really, really important. You've got community life, you've got your faith life, you've got work life, and you gotta find what the right balance is for you as the individual. I think to get to success in that area, and it's not an easy thing. I think back to what we talked about earlier about finding people. Not just hierarchically in the organization vertically, but latitudinally across the organization. I mean, certainly there's people that we could look at across our organization that may be lower on the totem pole, the corporate totem pole, laterally on that we admire, right?
Yeah.
And building relationships with those people and learning from those people how they do it, I think, is important. For one point in my life, in my career, I probably looked up and I was on 5 or 6 nonprofit boards.
Wow.
And raising kids, having a family, and trying to invest in your career and do good things in the corporate life, and being on 6 nonprofit boards, I completely overextended myself. And so I had to peel that back a little bit because, like I said, I possibly could have encountered some health issues. And I probably, during that period of time, missed some commitments that I had made. And that's not good. That's not healthy for you as an individual. It's not healthy for the organization or the people that you're making commitments to. So I think that balance, it's probably be better to be less committed early on in your career and just kind of ease into what that looks like for you. There's great programs out there in a lot of our metropolitan areas. Chicago in particular has a program called, I'm going to forget the name of this now, but it's a board preparation program, a nonprofit board preparation program, and it's a series of like 8 weeks of instruction as well as immersion into nonprofit community, and you get a certificate afterwards. But you learn a lot along the way. What does it mean to be on a nonprofit board? Wow. And how do you balance your time between corporate life and devoting to a nonprofit entity to help that organization and ultimately your community? So I think that folks that want to get involved in that and want to pay it forward or give back to the community can find those organizations in through chambers of commerce and other areas. Yeah,
that's good, and I'm glad you said that about when you're early in career doing less, because I can speak from experience. When you get into the industry, you want to show your value, and sometimes you think by showing your value means committing to 12 different things. Yeah. Right? But that's not always the case.
Yeah, you don't want to be over your skis going down that hill. Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's awesome. So we're going to get into our Fab 5 round, which is a series of 5 rapid fire questions. Before we get into our Fab 5 round, I want to mention that this podcast is brought to you by ETS Solutions. ETS is a faith-based technology consulting company, and we specialize in multi-location implementations to provide our 3 values and guarantees, which is to increase revenue, decrease cost, and increase productivity every time. And so for more insider information on ETS Solutions, visit etssolutions.com. And now, Fab 5, are you ready?
Sure.
All right, question number 1.
Just like a rapid fire?
Yeah, I'm going to try. All right, I'm going to try. Question number 1, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Wow. Well, I don't know. That's a great question. I suppose the superpower I would have is the ability to the ability to help people see things from other angles. I don't know if that's a superpower, but if there's a way that during the course of a conflict or what have you, you could pause someone's mind and have them see things from the opposite person's perspective.
Wow.
That might be a superpower that would contribute to a lot of good versus, it'd be really cool to fly, right? Or be invisible. Yeah. But I would choose that.
I like that. And it's kind of like mind control, but in a positive way.
Yeah, right.
In a positive way.
Yeah.
So question number 2, what is one thing that most people don't know about you?
Most people don't know about me. I'm writing a book.
Wow.
Very few people know that.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's fiction, and
Really?
I started it a long time ago, and honestly, I just picked it back up again because for a host of reasons. Notwithstanding, some of my friends are on the verge of publishing fictional novels, and so I'm like, you know what, I need to dust that off and finally finish this thing.
That is cool.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Question number 3. If you could have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
3 people, dead or alive. Okay. So let's go down the biblical path.
Okay, let's do it.
I think I would choose Joseph, Jacob's son, because why? I mean, he's just an interesting person, but what a incredible demonstration of faith he had. He had a rough road early on. Getting thrown in a pit, getting sold, or into slavery, and then achieving success that kind of just fell into his lap, and then getting thrown in prison for 10, 11 years, and having a faith in God that whatever path he was on was the right path.
Amazing.
He had some early difficulties, but ultimately, found himself in a very enviable spot.
Yeah.
And then his forgiveness of his brothers, having that kind of forgiveness, I think is admirable. So definitely Joseph would be one. I think the second person would be C.S. Lewis. I think that, a host of reasons. Notwithstanding, I want to ask him about the Great Divorce and, a lot of, contemporaries, fans of C.S. Lewis and those who aren't fans have made a lot of commentary around whether or not C.S. Lewis actually believed that post-death you had a second chance, and the Great Divorce kind of implies that.
Yeah.
So I would ask him that question, but just C.S. Lewis in general, kind of his path to becoming a one of the greatest authors in the history of the world. Notwithstanding, he went from certainly not having any faith to having tremendous faith, and made a lot of contributions not only to literature but film. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Last one. I will say Martin Luther King. Wow. And I know I picked 3 dead people, and I guess I have aspirations that if I had to pick someone alive, I could still actually have dinner with them, because you never know. I might bump into them on the street.
That's true.
I would love to get Martin Luther King's perspective on what's happening in our world today and in our country. And if you go back and watch his speech, and shame on me, I know it was 1963, but I don't know the exact date. But if you go back and watch his speech, first of all, a lot of people don't know that he kind of ad-libbed the whole I Have a Dream part, because George, the basketball coach from Washington State in Iowa, George, that's terrible, I don't remember his last name, but he actually asked Martin Luther King for the copy of his speech that he was using that day. And Martin Luther King made a statement during that speech. Obviously, I Have a Dream was a huge part of that and what most people remember. But he made a statement that this is the greatest demonstration in the history of our country. And that is interesting because he didn't say in the history of the world. right? So I think he had an intrinsic sense that America is a small piece of this whole thing called humankind. And I think he knew what he was saying when he said this is the greatest demonstration in the history of our country versus using the world. I would love to have dinner with him just to, pick his brain on what he thinks our next steps are to resolve some of the issues that we have.
Wow, that's amazing. Love that. Okay, let's see. Question number 4. What is your favorite word, or what word do you use the most? I know, funny.
What word do I use the most? My favorite word. My favorite word is Jesus. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I love that. The last one. What's one thing that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career?
At the beginning of my career, what I wish I'd have known at the beginning of my career. Well, we talked a little about the importance of relationships, and I think that certainly is one of them. Pace. We talked a little bit about that too.
Okay, yeah.
It's a marathon. I've run 3 marathons. No more. The right knee will not take it anymore. And I know I don't look like a guy that can run a marathon. I had a chiropractor once, a great friend of mine. I've known Scott for 30 plus years. And I mentioned to him that I had run my first marathon. He goes, "What? Because you're built like a fullback. How could you run a marathon?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just did it." And I think pace is really important. Pacing yourself. Hopefully it's a long marathon. Hopefully you have a long life. But pacing yourself. I think early on, I was trying to do too much, back to taking on too many commitments. So I would say that is probably something that is a lessons learned for me. If I had to do it all over again, I think I would have set a more reasonable pace, professionally and personally.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to end. I wanted to dive deeper into it, but I think that we've covered a lot. So this was great, Robert. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate
being on our platform.
Yeah.
And so thank you guys for watching CIO Insights by ETS Solutions. See you all on the next episode.